Running Sentences presents Pirates, Politics, and Potentially Treasure, Book 1, Part 11. Rascals, Fights, and Blood. Things are thrown up in the air with everyone trying to sort out what is going on, and if there's treasure or if they need to fight one another. This story is written and narrated by Michael Honore. It is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real situations, events, characters, businesses, and/or fictional situations, businesses, characters, and events is purely coincidental. Copyright 2023, Michael Honore. All rights reserved. The chambers in the presidential meeting room aboard his ship, his cruiser, the GCS Bruiser, was a nice one, but he was rather busy to pay attention to any exterior details, as he was in the middle of a conference with a few officials. Those aliens were all back home, on the home planet, trying to make sure things were running smoothly for the Galactic Empire, of course. With a second rumble, Utility turned to his secretary to his right. "What was that?" "I do not know, sir. Do you wish me to find out?" "At once. We are still nowhere near where we need to be, and we are getting these weird things going on." The secretary rose from his chair and moved to the wall next to the door, where there was a communications pod. The president ended his own call with his officials and sat back in his chair, waiting for answers. "Bridge, this is the president's secretary looking for answers as to what is going on." "Nothing is going on at the moment you need to know about." This caught the secretary off guard, and he recoiled for a second before pressing the button again. "President Utility disagrees with that. Tell us what has happened." There was a heavy, long pause with no response, so Blows, the secretary, turned back to his boss. "Well, we need to know. Go out and find someone who will tell you something. I will move to my safety cabin for safety's sake." Hearing the order, the secretary nodded and left the room. Fortunately for Utility, he realized since this room wasn't connected to his own chambers, that meant he would have to exit as well. If there was any attackers aiming for him, a likely thing, since no one liked him much, death might await him if he went outside. For a while, he merely sat there, listening for any extra noises that might happen. It was dead still, though, so he got up and made for the doorway. Poking his head out, there was nothing out of the ordinary, and the hallway was rather empty of any aliens. Utility was quick to exit and began his hurried step down the hallway. It was quite a ways to get to his room, and then the safety room hidden inside it. And his furious looks about the place, going unnoticed, since no one was around to take notice. With no incidences beyond the original scare of weird rumbles, he made his way into his room and slipped inside, locking the door behind him as he got in. Things hadn't settled down for Cordite and Tulis, as they were tossed about heavily by the second explosion. Red lights and a siren of some sort were creating a lot of noise while making it hard to see. Cordite had landed on his belly when the second one had gone off, but he was quick to get to his feet and offered his hand to Tulis. She too had suffered a similar fate as he, but had done a face first hit instead of belly first. With her helped up, he went over to the door to see if it was operational. It opened halfway before getting stuck, and then closed itself again. "That doesn't bode well for us, I don't think." "What's happened?" With a shrug, he turned to a nearby communications pad that sat near the door. It sparked and fried, with more and more sparks coming out of it. "I don't think we're going to get any answers until we get out of here. Can you squeeze through this doorway?" "What if there's something dangerous on that side?" "There could also be something dangerous leaking into here, and if we don't get out, it will kill us. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but we can play a game of what if later." She frowned and nodded as she moved towards the door. Cordite stepped over and pushed it so that it would open, allowing her to easily get out. He did note, though, that it seemed to open quite a bit less than before, and him following her out did not seem like it would happen. Instead, he let the door slip shut once again once she was outside. Nero sat in the lobby of the Grogian embassy, biting his lip and waiting for word on what was going on. He did not like his sister going out on a fool's mission, but he knew she was attracted to danger even if she didn't necessarily like danger itself. If you keep biting your lip in such a fashion, you might bite it off. At the sound of the ambassador's voice, Nero jumped up from the seat he was on and spun about. There was nothing to like about this place or cricket. The alien always looked like he was planning something in Nero's mind. What do you want? I'm giving you an update on the situation on the border. Things have gotten a bit wild. How? There was an official invitation by your government to President Utility to come see them. And by the government, I mean your parents. That didn't sound right to Nero at all. His parents? The ones who had so cruelly thrown him and his sister to the side? What were they up to? What were they doing and why were they doing it? I don't care about them. My only concern is my sister, who is aboard the same ship as the president I know. What about her? Is everything okay with them? The response was a shrug, and a terribly unconvincing one at that. I haven't heard anything about them or from them, and I asked to be kept in the loop by the galactic government. This feels wrong. Nothing feels right these days, I've noticed. My life hasn't had a right day in a long time ever since I was sent away by your parents. But you don't care about anything but you and your sister, so I'll save you a story. With that, the ambassador stormed off. Tulis stood alone in the hallway of the cruiser. She had expected Cordite to come out after her, but the door had closed and showed no signs of opening again. Are you abandoning me, Cordite? Her shout at the door produced nothing in the quiet hallway that had absolutely nothing going on. There had been the rumbles and the explosions, but out here everything was normal? That was aside from the workers who were busy moving about, none of them paying any attention to her. That was until she stepped in front of one of them. Excuse me, what happened? What is going on? What was that rumble? I don't understand. Nothing has happened, miss. Don't lie to me. We all felt the ship shake and then alarms going off. The worker shook their heads no, then hurried around her. She swirled around to try and come up with some last thing to say, but couldn't think of anything. Figuring that they were apparently going to give her any answers, she went back to the door to Cordite's room. She stood in front of it, waiting for something to happen. It still didn't open, and the search for the release button or something turned up nothing. Since she couldn't find that, she decided to begin banging on the door with her hand a few times, until a worker came by. Ma'am? What do you want? That part of the ship has been cut off. Now swirling on the worker, she looked him up and down to try and understand what he was saying. Can you explain to me what you mean by that? And to make sure that she got an answer, she grabbed a hold of the worker's uniform with both hands. That part of the ship is in lockdown since something happened to it. I think a loss of pressurization or something. I haven't been told anything other than it is locked off. She decided to let go of him and began moving rapidly down the hallway. Her only thought was to get to the president and get some answers from him. There was a feeling of weightlessness that overtook Cordite as he simply stood there looking about his room. He found himself floating upwards slightly and then touching the ceiling a second later with his hand to stop himself from hitting it. The move had come instinctively to him, having spent so much time in space. It also sent a hard, cold dread through him, since what he'd seen from the hallway looked fine, yet this was happening in here. Think, Cordite. What can I do? The door are probably locked, and I don't see any big vents in or out of here. He began slapping at the ceiling to see if any of the panels were loose. The hits echoed about the room, but nothing moved. He shifted to the walls, repeated the process on all four of them to see if they were solid. They were, so then he moved down to the floor. It seemed solid there already, but it was worth a shot to see what might happen. The move he made to the floor did nothing while tapping at them. Well, I guess this is one way to probably die. Lying back, he let himself float, lying on his back, and just stared at the ceiling, letting the lack of gravity take over. The wait for something to happen seemed to be taking forever, so he decided to go to sleep after all, since it was getting pretty cold in here and he figured conserving energy and anything else would be a good idea. Hiding behind his desk, Utility stared at the back wall of his safe room. He hadn't heard from anyone, which was terribly concerning. There had been a few bangs on the door into here, but he had been ignoring them. That was because there was a proper way to get in touch with him, and knocking on the door was not it. There was also a crackle from the communicator on the desk, but he wasn't going to answer that either. Something was up, and once again, that was not the proper way to talk to him. Go away unless you have information and know the proper ways to talk to me. It fell quiet once again, and he hugged himself into the well under the desk. Having been held in his cell for a little while, Vic was unhappy with the state of things. The ground, for one thing, was not carpeted. Then there was the fact that he hadn't been fed yet, which, to him, was awful. The room was dark and damp, with a few lanterns out in the hallway, but none in here, when the sounds of footsteps alerted him that something or someone was coming. Who is there and who wants me? The figure of the king and queen appeared before him, safely flanked by 2 guards. You know who we are. There's no need to shout since no one else in the government wants to come see you. I should inform you that your plot has been unveiled, by the way. You two are a curse on this empire. We built it to be what it needed to be. You are already a small cog and a forgotten one. If I'm already forgotten, then why are you here? To me it sounds a lot like fancy talk to justify yourselves. You fools have nothing. Well, we wanted to give you a chance. Clear the air, clear your name, prove that it was President Evok that led you astray. Exactly, but if you don't want that, your execution will be witnessed by everyone likely tomorrow. What do you mean, witnessed? The galactic government is in town and wants to talk peace. The president will be here, and we know he doesn't like loose ends. Vic gulped at the thought of losing his life, and in front of a hated rival. That damned Utility had once been a friend to them, but now works with pirates and all sorts of ugly, ugly creatures. How could these two even think about inviting that creature here? I don't have much to say. So you choose silence. I didn't say that. I'm merely organizing my thoughts on the matter, and that I might not have much to actually say on whatever it is you want. He paused as he got up from the bed to pace about the space of the cell. His movement caused the 2 guards to instinctively tighten their grips on their weapons, so he stopped doing this instantly. There was no need to be on the end of a blaster bullet, simply because he was walking about. His brain was trying to come up with some believable lie to tell, or truth that might eke out an existence for him for a little while longer. What do you know of this plot to take power? Enough to know that the Empire was at risk if they were to succeed. You had a plot to take power for the entire kingdom. It wasn't just the president, though. Most of our Congress wants it to happen. Even the opposition party approached me about breaking away from the galactic government. This cannot be swept under the rug, no matter how hard you try to. The usual lies about who was a part of it. Not lies. The opposition party leader admitted to me that they want a divorce from the galactic government. I'm sure you have ears all over the place that have heard it. And how would we have ears where this conversation took place? Because it happened at the legislative building, in the main hall to the debate chambers and such. In his eagerness to get all of this out, Vic had gone up to the glass wall that separated the 2 parties. His hands pressed against it as the two guards moved a bit in front of the royals to stop any weirdness from happening. "That is all you have to tell us." "That is only the beginning of it. There were more plots on the families of royals, but I can only reveal more once let out of here." A look of disgust crossed the faces of the queen and king, but neither said anything, and rather than say anything, they began moving away. They were soon gone from sight, leaving him unsure if they'd actually listened to him. He only had to wait a few minutes to see another person come hurrying down the hallway, this one with a keycard of some sort in their hands, and they looked rather exhaustedly sweaty. "They're letting me go?" The sweat and nervousness of the groggian made the card slip from their grasp and fall to the ground. With a hurried effort, it was picked up again. "You are being moved to another place. I believe still under arrest or something. The king did not specify what it was to be, but no mention of release was made, so you don't get that." A click sound was made and the door popped open. Vic resisted the urge to run out and away from all of this. It wouldn't help, and he was probably in a heavily guarded place anyway. Instead, he took his time to step out, and only when signaled to do so. "I guess it would be too much to ask where we're going, since you're a lowly peon." "Not a peon. I don't know. I'm merely to escort you outside. Don't try anything. You will be handed off to somebody else." "Do I look like the sort who would try something?" "Yes. Now move down the hallway, please." Outside the cell, Vic found himself pushed hard to go in the direction that this person wanted them to go. He followed the orders, waiting for some sign that escape could potentially work in his favor, but more than willing to just go along with things for now. A bright, sunny day greeted him as he stepped out from the underground cavern. He'd come up a set of stairs, prodded by the guard who had fetched him, and now he was out here in this bright light. It took only a second and a few steps for his world to be pulled apart. Rough hands had grabbed him and began hauling him off while he blinked, trying to adjust. The attempts to get his vision back were not going all that well. "What are you doing?" "Moving you to a better location. You requested a nicer place to lay your head, and your request has been granted. As long as you feed answers to the king and queen, fail to provide that, and it's back to the underground you go. Or maybe you go to the execution room. No idea. They didn't tell us what's next for you." "Then why are you telling me this?" "It's something to do, and you get a chance to think about your future. Life can't proceed without a future, so be careful with what you say and what you think. And don't lie, since I think the royals have a way of figuring out when you're doing it." "What do you mean, you?" He could see now again, and found himself being dragged along a stone pathway towards a door to the interior of the castle. Giant, grey-ish structure that seemed to stretch up skyward for ages. Not wasting time, he looked to the big creatures, wolf-like, that held him in their arms, one to each side, and only with one paw wrapped around each arm. "Let's see, how long ago was that, Glob?" 2 years ago we saw the event." "Right, on the parade ground. One of our officers lied to the queen right to her face as we marched by. She stood up in a hurry, and boop, the officer was suddenly on the ground. They were dead, but we had to keep marching on by and pretend that nothing had happened." "How did you know that she was aware that he was lying?" "Well, he said the king was dead. Obviously the king was sitting right next to her, and was fine." It was a thought that worried Vic, since something happened that day, but what and how had she gotten a soldier killed simply by standing up? "Do you know anything about it? What happened?" They looked at him oddly to show that they didn't know, and hurried him along to the castle. Tulis entered the presidential office for the second time, and made straight for the safety door that was unveiled. For some reason, it was clearly marked out amongst the cleanly, well-kept space, probably because the president had been in such a hurry and didn't decide to close the secret passage door to it. "Get that door open, please." A few guards had come in and looked about confused. "Where is Utility? You said he needed help." "Yes, he got stuck in the safety room testing it out." This only caused the soldier who had talked to raise their eyebrows. The human-like fox creature turned to her with a clawed paw. "How do you know that?" Realizing that she may be a bit over her head, she shrugged. "I heard a muffled noise coming from the door when I came to see him." "Why did you come see him?" "Part of the ship is on lockdown, and I think an important member of his team, or whatever this expedition is stuck in there, so it is important to get them out, and it's important to know what's going on." The words and seriousness did not seem to have the slightest bit effect on this person. This was not what she wanted, and fear began to run through her mind, since she worried that there was only so much time she could spend standing around, especially if oxygen decided it was leaving that space that Cordite was in. "We need to get to the president. Get the president, or this whole mission might go up in smoke, along with the ship." "Why would it do that?" "Because I'm groggy, and if my government thinks something bad has happened to me, they won't hesitate to attack you. Do you understand?" There was a nod from this soldier who was leading the group. "I know a bluff when I see it. Come on, soldiers, let's get out of here." Tulis stomped down her foot, but they did not bother paying any attention, leaving her all alone in the room. The last few days had been hard on Ophelia, with little sleep or time to do anything. The ship had been a buzz of activity, trying to avoid minefields, asteroids, and the groggy Navy, though the last one had dropped off a bit behind them. That was what had allowed her to slip off to catch some quiet time and sleep in her room, though now awake she saw a bunch of floating screens near her desk that had warnings all over them about this and that. Slowly she got up from her bed and made her way over to see them as a communicator in her ear came to life. "Ma'am, we have a situation." "When don't we, Portal? What's going on? And are they related to the warnings that I'm seeing?" "Nope, we're headed straight for an uncharted planet." "Second in command, please speak plainly and clearly. I know that we are all on edge and tired, but I need to understand you and what you're saying." "We will avoid it, of course, but the area we're going to seems completely uncharted." Now at her desk, Ophelia flipped through a few of the screens until she had one that showed her where they were headed. A blank void in the shimmery planet greeted her and the map. "And our pursuers from the Navy?" "They dropped way back and are barely on our radar, but they're there." Which could mean two things. They're scared of the area, or there's a trap. Fun. "Your orders?" "Put engines into reverse thrust and keep us out of the area for now. We'll send out a few drones to see what we can about the situation." "Are you sure? I doubt the Grogians will waste an opportunity to get rid of you in such an area." "Keep an eye out for them and keep the engines hot. We won't give them an opportunity to kill us, at least not right away. Get it done and don't contact me for an hour unless it is dire. I need some more sleep." She flicked her hand, ending the communications line, and then sending the warning screens away. Once they were all gone, she stormed her way back towards her little capsule bed chamber to recharge for a bit. An hour in the chamber would give her the equivalent of 6 hours of hard sleep. The time went by, and with a hiss, the chamber let go after the appropriate time had elapsed. Groggily, she rose and rubbed her eyes. It didn't feel like an entirely successful in getting her rest, but she got some, and there were more various warning screens now floating over her desk, which, with a flick of her wrist, came closer to her so that she could read them. She waved her hand towards her ear to open the line of communication with the bridge. "What's happened so far?" "The drone cameras won't work in that area, ma'am. Also, a Grogian ship is trying to sneak up on us." They really are quite lazy how they do things. No choice, I guess. Head for this planetary space and let's see what we can find. All crews remain on high alert. They are nearing their exhaustion level, ma'am. Get near the planet. It should give us some cover since the Navy doesn't want to be in this area. Then we can begin shifting people off for rest. The screens were now up close, giving a view of the drones it sent back. A few snippets of pictures and flashes of white, but it was mostly an eerie dark blackness. She bit her lip. It was dangerous, and she liked that. But to not have any other plan or route away from here was a danger, and she shouldn't follow dangerous plans for the sake of it. The choices she had, though, were limited. No, it was set, and going back now would only put them in the sights of the Navy. So forward it was going to have to be, towards this weird, shimmery blackness that seemed to be in front of this planet. Nero plodded his way across the transport that would take him up to a cruise ship that was headed to the Grogian planet Alpha, just on the exterior border. Behind him was the motley crew of Francis and Mott, who he hadn't invited at all to this investigation of what was going on. Why they'd suddenly showed up when he had told no one of his plans annoyed him to no end. In fact, he spun about to face them, since he could feel them closing in on him. I know who you two are, so stop following me. We're not following you. Then why are you getting aboard this ship? We were requested to go visit a place, and with Francis acting as the lead of the embassy, he decided we should go. To where? It isn't important that you know our business, sir. We happen to be headed in the same direction as you are. Now, if you don't mind, we would like to get aboard. This really isn't about the rumors that something has happened to the cruiser my sister is on, and that your associate as well, I guess, is on. There was a shrug as the two went past him, hurrying towards the ship. They were almost at the landing plank before Nero had collected himself. His mind had been trying to process why this all felt so weird and trap-like to him. He didn't need these extra thoughts when it came to such things. There was only his sister, and the rest of the galaxy could save itself or be damned. He didn't really care. There is one thing I would like to know. Francis had stopped at the doorway into the little transport pod as Nero caught up and looked him over. The pirate somehow came across like a politician dressed to look the part. Not a trustworthy sort of figure, because politician and pirate, neither very trustworthy professions. What is it? Your sister is all you care about, right? She is all I have right now. You have plenty of aliens willing to lend you a hand, my group of pirates included, and we already have to an extent. You might want to tone things down with how angrily you approach, though. What do you mean? Doc Mott appeared in the doorway and grabbed at both of them to pull them through. You're seen as a person who is in love with your sister. The politicians talk about it, but won't say so publicly to your face. Also, you seem to yell at everybody. I love her, but as a sister who doesn't have much left in this hellhole of a world, a galaxy, whatever you want to call it. There were shrugs from the pirates as the gangplank passageway door began to shut behind them, so that they could take off. The new alien creatures known as Demon and Keeper had squirreled themselves away in the corner of a cargo space. Both had a bit of a panicked look on their faces. They refused to move as boxes and various other objects were floating about in this space untied down, and they provided a little bit of cover. This was your plan? Shut up, Zul. It would have worked, but for those fools aboard this ship didn't seem to care what's happened. Oh, don't use my old name, Evok, or we'll get in trouble. We already are in trouble, fuckwit. The two threw a few punches at one another, with none of them landing. In all of this effort to do this, they found themselves suddenly very cold as exhaustion began setting in. Still not used to their new bodies, and well, the low oxygen environment had left most of everything that they had out of them. You fool, this is your fault. It is not my fault we are stuck in here, Keeper. Yes, it is. You came up with this plan to get us off of this ship and to freedom. Fine, it was partially my plan, but you went along with it. They sat down, trying to corral what little strength they had and to hold themselves down as things were floating by. A few red warning lights were now blazing away, but they weren't paying any attention to them. This as the doorway to the bay opened, and in came a few soldiers, floating, with their rifles at the ready. It took only a minute to reach the two, who now managed to notice what was going on. I blame Demon for all that has occurred. It was Keeper's fault, not mine. He was the one who came up with this entire plan and put it in motion. There was no response from the soldiers who'd come in with their rifles all trained on them. What do you want from us? Confessions? We already gave those. In the background, another red light had begun to flash, and the cargo bay doors had begun to open as both realized what might happen. There was a desperate reach for anything attached to the ground or secured to the ship itself that would help keep them where they were. We promise that we will lead you to the treasure planet. I don't know much about it, but I do know it is in the Groggian Empire. One of the soldiers held up a palm outward in a stop motion. The red flash of light stopped and the doors in the bay began to shut again. Thank you. Demon scurried forward as warmth and pressure began to return to the cargo bay. Full-on pressurization came a second later, which caused their ears to pop. Well, we will keep our word. Just lead us out of here and we will show you the way at this very moment. They were, though, soon grabbed up and led away from the chamber without a single word being issued by these soldiers. The hiss of the airlocks releasing on the door worried Utility, who still curled up under his desk. No one had contacted him about opening the door, and now it was opening. This was bad. He'd hidden here to keep safe, not to let the galaxy see him like this. He'd worked hard on his image, and he'd be damned if this was his last moment. I am armed! Do not enter this chamber! He shouted this as he reached for the hidden sidearm that was attached to the desk. It came away easily enough in his hand, and he was soon jumping up from under, swirling about to face the door. It had opened, but no aliens were coming through it. Good! You listened. There was a soft thunk, thunk, and what looked to be an object, cylindrical in nature, that came to a stop on the floor in the room. A flash of white light then overtook everything. Having had no luck finding anyone to help her, Tulist marched down the hallway, heading nowhere in particular. Her mind had scattered to all of the places, searching for some sort of solution to this, and to getting Cordite. She, however, was questioning herself as to why she actually wanted to do this. He didn't matter much, perhaps good-looking in a rough fashion, but that wasn't really a reason to want to save him that she could really put forward. While she was thinking about this and trying to come up with a solution, it just wouldn't come together, and she barely noticed that there were now two strange soldiers by her side in weird uniforms. Who are you? Command has issued an order to secure all passengers. Why? Orders. The President ordered this? You do not have the need to know that. I think I have a need to know. What is going on here all of a sudden? Her arms were grabbed by the two soldiers, and she began to struggle to get away, a task which was not going her way in the face of strong aliens. Let go! A hand clasped over her mouth as she was dragged off towards a nearby room. Any nearby crew members all pretended not to notice this. The endless, quiet, and floating sensation that had kept Cordite company was nice. He tried to go to sleep, but it hadn't really worked, and left him lying on nothing, floating about, staring at anything that he could stare at, before it got boring and had to adjust his gaze to something else. He was wondering if it was the idiots that he suspected were Zol and Evok that had caused all of this, when he suddenly dropped to the floor with a heavy thunk. The air was knocked out of him for a moment, but he was quick to collect himself as best he could and sit up as the door opened. Who is there? Who is it? A soldier marched in looking at him, and then raised his laser rifle. Are you taking over the ship? Who are you? Guest of the President, though I doubt that is a good thing to say now that I've said it. And you? Who are you? It doesn't matter who I am. You're to be taken to the proper chamber. To be disposed of? Get up. Knowing better than to fight any such orders, he slowly rose, with both hands raised. You would get much more cooperation if you were willing to talk, sir. The gun was still pointed at him, and the alien now slid their finger towards the trigger. Violence doesn't get you anywhere? Shut up, pirate. So you do know who I am, then? There was no response, and the soldier stepped back to let him walk past him to get out the door. Cordite moved that way, but kept himself facing the armed alien, whose finger now lay on the trigger. Are you taking over the ship, or the empire that is the whole galaxy, or doing something else? What are you guys up to? Now at the door, though, he gave one last look at the soldier as he positioned himself to slip out the door sideways. The last thing he wanted was to be shot in the back. The sound of the soldiers taking a few steps forward hurried him to make sure that he wouldn't get shot that way. He only managed a few steps out and kept his back to the wall and the side step before he was forced to come to a stop. There were a few other soldiers all around him, all of them with their weapons trained towards him. Nice to meet all of you. Might some kind alien please fill me in on what's going on, and do so, please, before you shoot me and fill me with holes? One of them stepped forward, looking much like the rest of the uniformed soldiers. A fine, pressed and creased space uniform with a helmet obscured their face. The darkened visor then lifted up on its own, and he was met with a green, square-looking head. This is a takeover. I figured that was what you might be doing, but right now and here, on the verge of entering the domain of probably the most hostile country under galactic rule and so on? You talk like a politician. Cordite winced at this, since he'd only been at this political thing for a couple of weeks, maybe? He'd lost track of time and all that had happened to him recently, and now to have that thrown at him made him feel dirty and used. Well, I am a ship salvager who got thrown into a job of ambassador for pirates. I am no politician, and I never wanted to be. The soldier who had stepped forward seemed distracted for a moment, head cocked to the side like they were listening to some orders over their headpiece. It was over, though, in a moment, and the soldier spoke. Right, orders are to finish the job. Execute at once, group. Hearing this, Cordite shut his eyes. The last thing he wanted to see was several laser rifles firing at him all at once. End of Part 11, Book 1 of Pirates, Politics, and Potentially Treasure. Thank you for listening.